Board games, board games. We might be talking about board games and Andy's life, but we're not gonna shout. This is Andy and this is me. We are two people on the screen, and we have met each other at National Theatre. We have play tested several games together. We used to be at the previous location. But Andy's a wonderful person, and now finally we get to have an extended conversation. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. is UK time, time for Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder, episode 991, where I call some of these episodes just meeting, inserts name here, meeting Andrew Beardsley. And even though we have technically met, I mean, we've never properly sat down. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more of a chance to chat about what makes you tick. And you've written a lovely bio, which I got at the bottom in a marginally edited form. I hope you don't feel like I misrepresented you. But
No, that's fine.
Andy, who are you and what would you like people to know about you straight off the bat?
Well, I suppose I'm a board game designer, although I struggle calling myself that because I'm also lots of other stuff. I used to be an architect in a previous life, and I am also a painter. So I sometimes call myself an artist, depending on who I'm talking to. I got into board game design very accidentally as a hobby, and it sort of developed from there with no intention to be a board game designer. But I love it, and I do it as much as I can, and I'd like to do it more, and I'm excited to see where it leads.
And I mean, you are not only a game designer, you are an actual published game designer, which I think some people would be a wee bit envious of. That, I mean, coming out here with your game with all the fancy semi-transparent standees and all that zombie princess and the Enchanted Maze.
Yeah. As I
How
said,
did that come about?
well, to say it came about like accident is sort of a half truth, because about 5 or 6 years ago, it was one Christmas, I had some time on my hands and I thought I'd start designing a board game. And I always designed board games as a kid. I played games all the time. No one would play with me because I was a sore loser, but I've learnt and grown since then. And then I didn't play any games for years until I was in my late 30s, early 40s. And I got an itch and I had to scratch it. And it was to design the game that I would have loved to have had as a kid. And I was really into mazes. And all I wanted to play was a maze game that you could build yourself and explore and manipulate. So I started working on this just as a hobby, and I was playing with friends as you do, and I realized that people, well, the first prototype was over in 5 minutes, and it was a disaster, of course. That was one of the early prototypes there, and I realized people were enjoying themselves, and I thought, this is a really good feeling to have something that you've made. You're sitting in front of them, and everyone's laughing and having a good time. Most people are laughing and having a good time, I would say.
There's always going to be one or two people who, it doesn't jive with.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. That's some of the original concept artwork that I did with my friend and illustrator Luke Webb, who's fantastic.
I mean, how long? So this, by the number of weeks, it's just over 5 years ago. And how long had you already been working on the game before you started doing fairly nice illustrations like this?
Well, I was friends with Lou, and he actually did a lot of the playtesting with me. So he wanted to work with me on the game as well. So we actually became partners, and he actually ended up having a cut of the royalties as well. So we worked very closely together. I didn't realize what I could do with the game until I did a bit of research and I found about the UK Games Expo. I didn't know anything about it. I'd never been, and I saw that there was a competition to. It was called the Publisher Speed Dating Competition, which they do every year. And I thought, I'll enter that. Why not? Not expecting to be selected. It was selected for that, which I was very surprised about. So I went down to the UK Games Expo, having not prepared anything, just took the game with me and Lou. And we were sitting there in the morning, and Lou said, "Have you prepared a pitch?" I said, "No." I didn't know anything about pitching. I was completely unprepared. So he said, very wisely, he said, "We should just practice a little pitch." The event was in the evening, and we had the day. So we sat down at a table and ran through a pitch. And then we did the event, which was incredibly stressful, but incredibly exciting, where I think I sat down in front of 10 or 15 publishers, and you're given 5 minutes to pitch to each publisher. And they ring a bell after the 5 minutes, and the 5 minutes goes like that. And it was the more I did it, the better I got. So the first one was very shaky. By the end of it, it was like a well-oiled machine.
I mean, imagine if you'd started practicing it like the previous day. The
Yeah,
first one would have been a well-oiled machine, and then the last one would have been like something from the gods.
Yeah. And it was, and I think what helped me was that I had no expectations, so I was pretty relaxed, and I didn't think anything would come of it. We had booked a playtesting table the next day as part of UK Games Expo, who did this fantastic event at the UK Games Expo, as a Playtesting UK, sorry, where you can book a table and playtest with the public, which is so, you know how useful that is. So I had a playtesting table. Most of the publishers I pitched to were not interested, partly because it had very complicated 3D plastic pieces, and I developed a system of interlocking pieces that I designed myself. I'm an architect by trade, so I know about 3D design, I know about spatial design. That's what I'm interested in. And most of them said, we can't manufacture this because it's too expensive. It would be too expensive to actually make the product, which is, again, that was a big lesson to learn about making something that is profitable and affordable. One of the publishers, a guy called Zev Slassinger, who works at Wizkids, asked to play the game. So he came along the next day to the playtest zone, and I was just setting up a game with a
And Zev had met you during the pitching.
Yeah, Zev was there as part of Wizkids, so he was one of the publishers I was pitching to. I was just setting up a game the next day with a dad and his, I think, 6-year-old son, who was this lovely boy who was just really into zombies. And Zev sat down and was this. I didn't realize how big a deal Zev was in the industry, because I knew nothing about the industry, which again was in my favor. And we started playing it, and I was looking at Zev, and he seemed to be and then about halfway through the game, he started to smile, and everything seemed to come together, and he just said, "I want to publish your game." And
wow! So right there on the spot, I mean, that's practically unheard of.
Yeah, I nearly fell off my chair and sort of. I honestly didn't know what to say. Obviously I said, "That's fantastic." And then it took a while to get the contract drawn up, and then it went through quite a protracted period of development, partly because of the pandemic. Also, there was the Suez Canal problem, which meant that it took a long time for products to actually get to the country. And then the game came out at the end of 2021. I'm not very good with dates or years.
Yeah, and all of this artwork is done by your friend Lou.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really cool style. I really like the sorts of concept arts that we've seen, some lovely lines.
Yeah.
For those who are wondering, in as much or as little detail as you're comfortable, where exactly in the UK are you based? And how did you meet Lou?
I'm based in London, and Lou and I have been old friends for ages. We met through mutual friends. He's an illustrator. I've got a background in fine art, so we're both interested in the visual side of it. And I really wanted to work with someone who I had a close relationship with as a friend, and also could kind of enjoy the process together. So I think actually when we pitched the game, to Zev, we explained that a lot of the artwork had been done at least to quite a high concept stage, and we wanted Lou to be brought in as part of the team, which I don't think is particularly typical. So Lou,
that's very unusual to kind of say, this is my own art and let's stick with this.
Yeah, but again, I think part of that was my own naivety and my own ignorance of the industry. If I'd known better, I might not have taken that risk. But sometimes ignorance is bliss, I suppose, and it pays off. But what I loved about working with Lou is that he he's very influenced by sort of 1950s, 1960s Disney style, but he was also really open to being pushed in a different direction. And I knew I wanted this really angular style to suit the angular nature of the board. So I'm really excited when I see games where the illustration style kind of reflects back the style of the game. And so the maze is really angular, and I wanted all the characters to feel like they were growing out of the game in terms of their visual style.
I mean, just on the front and the typography, I can really see how it sort of meshes with the look of the squares if you're looking at them from an angle. And yeah, it's like the zombie princess is falling into this maze and becoming really part of it, as you say.
Yeah, we work quite hard.
What's with this ridiculous theme? Okay, tell us a little bit about how this came about. You say she was looking for love, now she's looking for lunch. I mean, Zombie Princess, the game, it's not that crazy or out there. It's a nice game and I would love to play it myself. I just want to say I've not had the opportunity to play it yet. But it seems like a really lovely thing. But it's not like the most radical games concept. But then you've come up with this zombie princess in the Enchanted Maze. It's just a completely silly thing. It kind of reminds me of Magic Maze, where it's a bunch of fantasy folk who are trying to shoplift a mall. That feels like it's your kind of design ethos. And I think, did you take yourself off Twitter because I tagged you and then I can't 8 years ago and then I can't find you anymore?
We need to do another video about Twitter and my relationship with social media and the internet. But
we'll get into more details in another time if we have a chance. But I am basically finishing these shows after next week when I get to episode 1000.
Right.
But because it's been a while and I need to start re-engaging more with the world around me and just be like, I mean, today at least I managed to take a walk around. But you know
Congratulations.
What? Thank you very much. I feel good about that. I got up, I put on my leggings. I mean, I'm not going to lie, there's some days that at this point I still don't have my pants on.
Oh my God. Too much information. Anyway, let's get your
But yeah, you've got all these whimsical things. And I said for legs that there's something, it reminds me of Manic Miner or something like that on the Spectrum, where it's like, yeah, why not? Let's just do this silly thing that came into our head because it's different, it's funny, why not do this?
I'm a big fan of why not. I like to think I've got a really stupid sense of humor, which that's not for me to say, but I just did say that. The zombie princess started off as a minotaur in a maze, because what do you find in a maze? You find a minotaur, and all the minotaur did was kill people, and that's not fun. So I wanted a way of keeping the characters engaged after they were caught. So I thought, well, what gets people but doesn't kill them? Zombies do that. Vampires also. I didn't actually consider vampires because I don't think vampires are very funny, but zombies can be very funny. And Lou and I are very...
I want to challenge that. I feel like zombies and vampires can be equally funny. I mean, a camp vampire can be a bit ridiculous. Like the Count from Sesame Street. Is the Count not kind of funny?
Yeah, that's true. And having said that, I'm about to contradict myself because I'm currently working on a game about funny vampires called Gruesome Garlicers, where vampires are sitting down for dinner and they're hungry, and then someone dumps a load of garlic on the table and they all freak out and they have to use their tongues to lick away the garlic towards their opponents. So I don't know what I'm talking about. We thought...
In that moment, you felt like zombies tickled your funny bone more.
It did. And also, I grew up near Hampton Court in southwest London, and there is an amazing hedge maze, one of the oldest hedge mazes in the world, in Hampton Court. And I loved hedge mazes as a kid. So I thought, well, who's going to build a hedge maze? Okay, maybe a princess is going to build a maze in her garden. And then I thought, well, why is she building this maze? Maybe she's building this maze as a challenge to find someone who's suitable for her hand in marriage. And I thought, well, that's boring, isn't it? What would happen if she, before the maze is finished, she gets turned into a zombie and screams, attracting people to her plight. They arrive at the maze thinking they're going to save her, but when they get in there, they find out that she's a zombie and she's trying to eat them. So that's where the once upon a time she was looking for love, now she's looking for lunch came about, which I'm secretly a little bit proud of. And I've also found
not so secretly, because he just told everyone.
Oh, you got me pegged.
Also, you're allowed to be proud. It's totally fine.
Oh,
you're allowed to big up yourself. You did some good stuff, and embrace it. Well done.
I also love the fact that some people sing along that line to the tune of Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. So instead of once upon a time she was looking for lunch, now she's only looking for love. Yeah, I've got it all wrong anyway.
She was looking for love. Now she's just looking for love.
So anyway, lunch.
The zombie princess, she's gonna eat your heart.
We've got to work on this. There's something there.
Let's take a step back and talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So what's the last game you played? But while you're thinking of that, I'm going to talk about what I got up to since yesterday. I have been looking at a lot of stuff from Categorical, which is really exciting. So my friend Jack Briggs Miller is working on the graphic design, and I've done all the illustrations, and hopefully I can find something. This is not going to be the front of the box. This is just a kind of very much a work in progress, but I'm going to show it to you all now. That's Categorical, that's my typeface. And I know what we're thinking is, let's totally change it so it's categoric in like just blackface, maybe black typeface at the top. Like, I didn't mean blackface. That's a problematic thing. Please don't do that. And then L in that typeface down below. And then looking at the actual cards, it's got these sorts of tutorial cards that tell you, hey, just read these 6 cards and it will tell you how to play as you go along. That's the backs of the cards. That's the sort of typography that you'll see when you flip them over. And it's got like the original typeface. It's got little letters in the corners so you can see it if you hold it in your hands. The numbers at the bottom that tell you how many of each letter appears. And I'm feeling good about it. And fingers crossed, we will be able to get a bunch of these for UK Games Expo. I'm not sure that it is ridiculously overdue, so it might not be available for sale, but what we will have is the original typeface available for sale. And so if you are like, hey, the L deck's been out of stock for a while, here's the original typeface, and with all the cards that maybe people either know or love, or if you don't, get in on it. And there's like little cards for like 6 different games. And so I'm really hoping that Kickstarter backers will be able to pick up Categorical at UK Games Expo, and that will be really nice. And I'll also give it to maybe a couple of reviewers, because that is something that it kind of needs to be done to make sure that there is an income later on, if you know what I mean.
That's great. You were working on that typeface last time we play tested at the National Theatre.
Oh, you saw me drawing the things.
Yeah. So it's come along. It looks really good.
And I'm glad that you like it. So I kind of, all of this is from the Copic paint markers, and I'm really happy with the sorts of bubbly fronts and the slightly stripy backgrounds, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Do you work by hand on everything you do?
I do. I don't like working digitally when it comes to illustration, and so that's why over here, sorry for the slight noise, this is a bag full of pens.
Great.
And those are my paint pens, and then I've got another bag full of other types of pens, like marker pens. But definitely, it was these, sorry, not Copic, Posca,
Oh,
the
I know those.
Posca
Yeah,
paint
yeah,
markers. And there's just some amazing colors here. And I think with that, with the opaque paint, you can really
yeah.
get some deep blacks and everything. So I
They're really
really
rich.
like it.
They're really rich, like acrylic liquid, aren't they? And they dry.
Mm,
I
mm,
made
mm.
I made some whiteboard markers with them, and they work 90%, but they're still a bit too fragile for making wipe off sheets. But anyway, that's another thing. There's a conversation to be had about the joys of doing things by hand as well, which I think is something that we should champion. Drawing and making things with our hands is a really wonderful way to work and a wonderful way to connect with what you're doing and make and allow it to be have a humane connection to other people as well.
I mean, you are someone who makes these lovely prototypes of, hey, I'm just going to stipple out all these dots and,
Yeah.
yeah, have a bit of fun while I'm doing this. And this is legs. I don't know what's happened to it.
Legs is on holiday at the moment.
Fair enough. I mean, it definitely felt like, you know, some
legs
you
legs
can't finish every game you start. And Eric Lang's gone on record as saying it that's really healthy and almost essential for
Yeah.
a good game designer
legs
to
is legs is an
be
interesting
willing
one.
to embrace that some of your things aren't going to see the light of day. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely 100%. And what's interesting is nothing is wasted because legs has actually gone on to inform a newer game of mine, which is like I call it Child of Legs, which is similar but different, and I think it's better. So nothing you do is wasted. And I also find the act of making a physical prototype is part of the design process. So there's one school of thought that says you shouldn't spend any money or time on a prototype, which spending money is always problematic because obviously it's in short supply for myself and a lot of other people. Spending time, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree that things should be done as quickly as possible because in the act of making something where you're taking care and time, you're actually thinking about what you're doing and the function of it and what purpose it has. So
Mm-mm.
it can inform the design, and the design will develop as you're taking that time to make something. And also,
I
some
kind of agree with that. I mean, all of the prototypes for Kitty Cataclysm, the cards were in a spreadsheet, and I kept track of, okay, what's the numbers for these going to be. But
yeah,
when it came time to make a new deck, I would always draw it out by hand. And
yeah,
when it came time to saying, okay, that should be, let me do a whole new thing because I've got some crossed off things. You know how it is, like you scribble out a number, you add on another number.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then by hand drawing everything, I started to think about the puns to the extent where, I like to think, I mean, where is it? Yeah, there's the like some people are like, oh, I really like the puns. I mean, Katana and like where you've got these things with the catalog, and Katana is a fairly good one where it was just through that meditative process of originally it was okay, what words are there with cats in them? Let me think about all this. Oh, you've got katana, like
yeah,
a cat wielding a katana. But then I kind of took it one step further and what if it was a cat Anna, like Anna?
yeah.
And like lots of the things, like if you've got the fatter cat, well, you've got to fat. This is basically a business person in a suit with a cigar, like you'd think of as a fat cat. But then you've
Yeah,
got the fat cat, but spelt with the ph, and then you've got the fattest cat, of course, and having those superlatives and that sort of, what can I call it, like a vertical cycle essentially.
yeah.
So there we go. The fattest cat is, and
It's
there's
a
the
logical
fat
conclusion.
cat.
Yeah,
Like I think you're right that as you're taking time doing things, that process can be meditative. And the
yeah,
question isn't how much time does this take you, but are you getting value out of this time? That should be the key consideration.
yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And it's part of a process. It's also it allows for iteration to happen as well. So you might make something that doesn't work, and then you realise that needs to be ditched, but it will always lead to something else. And if it doesn't lead to something else, then you know it's really a red herring or a dead end. So
Mm.
Yeah.
Because much as we might enjoy the idea of betting where on the foot you need to be, didn't quite gel with the mechanisms that were going on.
Absolutely. And what legs is an interesting case because it was, again, I submitted it to the speed dating competition with the publishers and it got selected, I think, because it is quite unusual, a theme. When I came to do my pitch, everyone seemed to love it, but they said, we don't understand what this is. What is it? Why is it like this? We love it. We don't know why we love it. And it wasn't picked up. And I'm not entirely surprised. So that was a really interesting experience with legs. And it's still there, and it's still, I think it's got some value, but it's moved, something has come out of that. So, and the reason it's called legs is because I had this idea. I was actually at the gym at the time, and I had this idea. I go to the gym and meditate on ideas. If I want to think, I go to the gym, and that's where I have
Do you do
space.
something where it's on a timer, like a rowing machine or a treadmill?
It's just the repetitive movement helps to allow the brain to make connections and allows ideas to develop, in my experience. So I was at the gym and I had this idea for a game, a deduction game, and I thought, oh, that idea has.
I don't want to drop it because I actually want to learn from you about, because if I'm doing, let's say that, and then I can only do 10 or 12, I've got to kind of count, and then the counting would not allow me to do other things. But if I'm doing something where it's, okay, I'm doing it, and then eventually there's a timer that goes off, then I can totally understand. So what exercises specifically do you do to help you meditate?
What it is, I do weight training, so I do reps, and they don't take very long, but it's the space in between the reps where I do the thinking. All you can do is sit there and do nothing whilst you're waiting for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and that's when the ideas get tested and work through in my brain. And then I have maybe 30 seconds of exercise where I do another set, and that's where the idea goes away again, and then you come back to it, and this repeats itself over and over again 10, 20, 30 times when you go to the gym. And it's a really, and also there are no other distractions. You're not talking to anybody, the phone's not ringing, you don't have anything else to do, so it's like it's me time. But I'm still working on two things at the same time. I'm exercising and I'm thinking and developing ideas. So it's that crucial thing where you get the repetition and a cycle over a sort of a short to medium time span, which I find really useful.
No, so yeah, you were saying that the idea from legs came appropriate enough when you were exercising your body.
Yeah.
Were you feeling a bit of burn in your legs?
Well, I just thought, I literally thought, oh, this idea has got legs. And I texted it to a friend of mine who's a big games player and is always a good sounding board for ideas. And I said, I've got this idea for a game. I think it's got legs. And then I said, I think it should be called legs. It should be on a leg. And that's where the theme came from. It was completely, for once in my life, it was completely arbitrary. But I needed something that had one thing that had discrete parts that were different and belonged to the same thing. So a leg has a thigh, a knee, an ankle, toes, and also you can put socks on which have coloured stripes. So they've got these long tights on that have got colours and patterns on them. So that gives another layer of artificial division. So that's where that stupid game came from. So
and when you say for once in your life it was completely arbitrary, I assume that was complete sarcasm.
82% sarcasm.
Okay. So let's get back to recent highlights. What was the last game you played?
Oh, the last game I played, there are two. One was Rear Window, which is based on the Hitchcock film, and it's a deduction game where it's sort of like Mysterium but simpler, where you're presented, one person plays the director, one person plays Alfred Hitchcock, and they're trying to help the other players identify who lives in different apartments and what their characteristics are, which is a really nice. I loved Mysterium, but it was too fiddly and there was too much stuff, and it was a little bit too long. And this kind of cleans it all out and focuses on the deduction, and it's a really streamlined game to play, which I really love. And then I also played Heat, which a lot of people are getting excited about. Have you played Heat?
I haven't, but it is like very much the buzz. Like since it
Yeah,
came out, I believe at Spiel 2022, like a lot of people have talked about it and said,
yeah,
yeah, really, really like how this evolves the Flamme Rouge setup.
yeah, yeah. I'm in two minds about Heat. I don't know if it's my kind of game for a start because, well, I don't know why I'm saying that, but we played two games and I got the impression that when we played, it felt like the last turn was the only turn that mattered, and that it was really well balanced, almost to a point where no matter what you did, everyone ended up bunched up at the end, and then whatever you did on your last turn determined the winner, which I found a bit disappointing. It was fun, and maybe I just need to play it a bit more. I know I did only play the base game without any of the extra stuff because I know it's got lots of modules you can add on, which is obviously gives it a lot
I
more
mean,
variety.
that's always a challenge as a designer, isn't it? Because you want, I mean, on one extreme is the Splotterspiel version where they say, well, if you can't lose the game on the first turn, what's the point in even having a first turn? On the other side is people who lose the game and then get sad and feel like, you still want to have a hope of doing something.
Yeah, it's balance, isn't it? And it's also managing expectations. I think as long as the game gives you hope and keeps you entertained, that's the least it should do. You certainly don't want to get the impression that you after your first move you've got no hope. That's the game has failed then. Whether or not you have got any hope is another matter, but hopefully the game conceals that from you well enough. What's interesting is that I was actually talking to a friend of mine, Rory Muldoon, who you may have met. He comes to the playtest events, and he's designed some really nice games, some really good print and play stuff. Roll and Writes he's done. And we were talking about Heat, and we came to the conclusion that the racing track is just a victory point track in the form of a racetrack. And instead of moving your victory point marker up a victory point track, you're moving your cars around the victory point track. And it's just this is an idea I've been thinking about, how we can integrate how a game can demonstrate how you're winning without the need for an abstract victory point track separate from the game. And I'm a big fan of games which show you how you win or show you that you've won without having to remove yourself and look at this separate element on the board or even off the board.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, I don't think, is that actually true? Because in Heat, aren't there different points at the same kind of distance along on the track where, you might be this far along the track, but whether you're here or here or here, it determines whether you'll be blocked by other people. Does that not happen in Heat, or?
You can't, unless I played it wrong, you can't block other players, but you can slipstream past them. So it is the world's most interactive victory point track. It's a fantastic victory point track.
I mean, is it not a two-dimensional thing, or is it just one-dimensional? Because I've not played Heat yet.
It's two-dimensional in that there are two lanes, but you can't get blocked, unlike in, I think, Formula D, where you can be blocked.
So it actually doesn't matter which lane you're in?
Don't quote me on this, and I'm sure people will disagree with me. I only played it twice, but I don't think it does. There is an inside lane, or there is the racing lane, which is marked on the board, which you're supposed to stick to if you can. But you can go past other cars. You can't be blocked. But again, if I'm wrong, then let me know and I'll play it again, and it'll be different. So yeah, that's it. So there's I think there are the same number of spaces no matter which way around which lane you're in. And then there's the thicker line on the board which indicates which is the preferred lane to be in. But having said that, we had a lot of fun and I did enjoy it, and I do want to play it again. So
it's not like you're saying this is a bad game, just that it's a really interesting way of looking at it. And and actually that makes it a lot nicer than if it was just, hey, you're racing, here's your board with all the cars, and here's some little tokens. I mean, the fact that everyone's looking at the same shared board presumably adds to it.
I love that. Yeah, the more interactive, the more social a game is, the more, I was going to say successful, but that's subjective. The more I love it. I want
Mhm.
games to be a social experience where people are engaging with each other and engaging around a central focus. I'm not a big fan of multiplayer solitaire games. They're not for me. But that's my preference. Um,
Question: what do
go
you
on.
feel about almost multiplayer solitaire games? Have you played Ricochet Robots?
No, but I want to play it.
So in Ricochet Robots, everyone's looking at the same board in the middle of the table, and your challenge is to work out the minimum number of moves you can solve this puzzle in, essentially. I'm not going to get into all the details. And then you might shout 7. And then everyone ponders. And if everyone's like, yeah, actually, 7 is the minimum, then you need to show how you do it. And if you're correct, then you win a point. Conversely, someone else might shout 6
Oh
because
yeah,
they
that's
fought
great.
for a bit longer than you and they can do it in 6. And then
Yeah,
if they can't, then you've got to prove that you, and basically the lowest bidder goes first, and then they prove they can do the puzzle. How do you feel about that?
I absolutely love that for one simple reason is that I am the idiot who will always say a lower number and then think, how the hell am I going to do this? And everyone will laugh at me because that's what I'm like. And I love that. I love that's an element to push your luck, isn't it? And I'm not someone who gets into really crunchy, thoughtful, calculating things. It's not my style. If I really have to do it, I will, but it doesn't bring me joy. But I will always say, no, I'm going to do better than you and watch me fail. And let's have a good time watching me fail. And then once in a blue moon, it might work, and then I'll be so happy. So that sounds great. I'll have to look that up.
I mean, it's interesting when you talk about it doesn't spark joy, because not every game has to spark joy, and I hope you'd agree with that. That games are a medium and not just a genre. And I think there should be more games that are about really horrific events
Yeah.
that are
Oh yeah.
saying, "Hey, let's
Yeah.
play this and really contemplate." But when you said in your bio, it's just scrolled past, but you said in your bio you want to elicit joy, surprise, intrigue, doubt, confusion, fear. I mean, these are very visceral emotions,
Yeah.
but what you're not mentioning is contemplation, like a quiet meditative contemplation.
Isn't
That's
that
not on your lists.
isn't that interesting? That, and I'm really fascinated that you noticed that and picked up on that because when I wrote that list, I was really struggling to think of extra things to say, and I didn't even think about contemplation. And I think that says as much about me as a person and as a character, as a designer, than anything else. That's not to say contemplation is less valuable or less.
But it's less valuable to you.
I think it's less, to use a term I don't want to use. I don't think I can easily connect or access that part of me. I think it's not something that I have a easy relationship with, and that goes down to my fundamental nature. I'm very spontaneous. I'm quite chaotic, and I'm a very active person, always doing lots of things. So, having said that, and I will contradict myself again and again. There are moments where I can get into what I call the flow, which is when I'm really absorbed in a game design, when I'm painting, for example. Uh,
Mm-mm.
and that is a part of sort of active contemplation.
But
Um,
that's a different sort of contemplation where you're reflecting inwards, maybe,
mm,
and you are not being forced to look X number of moves ahead, like you might need to do in a perfect information game like Go or photosynthesis.
yeah,
You are in those activities, doing the activity or doing the exercise, and then sometimes being like, yeah, you know what, life's all right. You know,
yeah,
I am Andy the Great.
yeah,
And
yeah.
um,
It,
I like to think that there's a difference with this kind of guided contemplation, which essentially it's almost is bringing in extrinsic rewards that the game is saying, hey, congratulations, if you do enough of this deep thinking, you will win,
yes, yeah.
compared to something where it's, hey, you can do it, but we're going to throw some random numbers in your way anyway.
Mm. I think. well, that brings up the question, the conversation about randomness, which I'm in love with randomness, but and when you talked about Go and a contemplatory game, that immediately made me think of, I used to play a lot of backgammon, which obviously has a huge random element to it. But what I think is the most seductive thing about backgammon for me was the meditative nature of it, and that it almost became, you're not so much playing a game, but you get into a rhythm of rolling the dice, moving the counters, rolling the dice, moving the counters, almost like you're on a train and it's just gently going over the tracks. And I would play game after game after game of that and feel a real sense of calm and relaxation, because it's not asking too much of you, and it's almost like a process that you're part of. So, but that has a huge random element.
Yes.
Obviously, you're throwing dice every turn. It almost takes you out of, the thinking you do when playing backgammon isn't dynamic thinking like chess. It's almost, I don't have the words to describe it, but I don't know if I'm conveying what I want to convey, but
it's kind of like, rather that, I mean, I would say that backgammon is more tactical, and there are certain moves, but you're like, okay, I've seen this situation before, this is what to move, and you can abnegate some of your responsibilities almost, because
yes,
responsibilities is a strong word, but you can abnegate some of that decision-making process and say, you know what, my fate is prescribed by these dice, and there is a large amount of truth to it. I mean, I'm far from the best, backgammon player. I'm sure that if we played 100 games, maybe you'd win. I don't know how good you are, like 70 of them, whatever. But the point is that, it's not like any of those other games where I mentioned, where like photosynthesis or Go or Pelos or Corridor, where actually planning and learning the game better might mean that whichever one of us is better would win 100 games of that. And so even though the skill ceiling is actually higher than it might appear, it feels more approachable, and I can hold off on actually feeling like I have to go into that study, if you know what I mean. Because Go, for me, has the lovely, lovely thing. My favorite bit about Go, and I'm not going to do my whole spiel about Go, but like my favorite bit about it is the extra stones you can give someone if they're a worse player. And that sounds harsh, but like if I'm teaching someone and they've never played the game before, I'll start them off on a 5x5 with a couple of extra stones, and then we'll build up to a 7x7 with, maybe 3 extra stones, and then eventually, okay, this is the first time you're playing on a 9x9. Well, maybe you get 4 extra stones, and it will be an interesting game. We're still accessing that, but we're playing on an even playing field. But without that, a perfect information game can just feel really brutal and horrible. I mean, I played this African game, I think it's called Bobaye. I don't know quite how you pronounce it, but you're moving one counter around one space at a time. If you pull it to your side, you win, or if you surround it, you win. But all your pieces are moving as far as they can, if you know what I mean. And then it's really, I mean, it's a perfect information game. So one of my friends played me about 10 times, and the first 3 times it was like, yeah, okay, and then like game 1, it was like, hey, would you like some tips? And I said, no, I'll play it like maybe 2 times or so, and that's fine. Like game 3, I'm like, okay, can you actually give me all the tips that you've got? And then I didn't quite understand them. Like I still didn't feel like I've got an idea of it. And then we played another like 4 or 5 times until I said, you know what, I'm feeling a bit frustrated at this point. Can we call this the last game? And they're like, yeah, of course.
Well, there are 2 really interesting elements in this conversation. I think one is tactics versus strategy, and I've always been a bigger fan of tactical play, which is more reactive and dynamic, maybe, than strategic play, because I don't know why, but maybe I don't have the capacity for long-term strategy. And then the other aspect is this idea of hidden perfect information, and I will always lean towards playing and designing games which don't have perfect information, but I'm very interested in the idea that games maybe that start off with perfect information, and then that information gets lost or confused, or you have to rely on a touch of memory to try and retain that perfect information. So, and I'm exploring that in one game in particular that I'm working on at the moment. But this is what's interesting about. I love talking to you because you really challenge me to think in depth about what I'm saying.
Yeah, I raised my eyebrow, and you know that I'm not going to just
Yeah, and thinking, hang
accept
on a
what you're
minute, what
saying.
am I going to get? And I can't remember the second thing, but the second thing was also good as well. So the perfect information thing, I am put off from perfect information games, partly for the what's that?
You were quickly distracted. So this is, and I
Ooh,
wanted
look, a
to
new
give
thing.
this as a free copy of Hasbro. This is Connect for Spin, and what happens is you place your
Oh, that's
piece
so
and
cool.
then you
That's
spin
so
it.
cool. Yeah.
So you don't know which side it's going to go up. Oh, red's won because red's got 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row.
That is very cool.
And if it had ended up the other way up, then, yellow would be thinking, now I've got a chance, maybe. And what do I do to get myself 4 in a row? But, you've got to spin the thing. So unless you could, of course, have something there and something in the equivalent space below it. So you've got 100% certainty. But for the most part, it's a game where, yes, the weight matters. I mean, yes, even if I do that, it's going to fall down because there's a bit more weight on this side of the lever. But because the magnets are strong enough, you can't rely on that at all. And then you'll get maybe like 3 turns in a row where it just happens the opposite way to how it should. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is... And that, I wonder, does that spark joy for you?
You can see I've bought that already. That's fantastic. And I can't wait to play that with my nieces because it will drive them nuts. So there was a game when I was a kid.
In a good way, like you mean excite them?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. There was a game when I was a kid. I don't know if it's still available, called Downfall, which had rotating discs, and you could see your side of the it was like a vertical, and you could see your side and where your counters are going in, and you knew that some of your opponent's counters were going in, but you couldn't quite remember where they were. And often turning a disc to get one of yours out would get 4 of theirs out, and you just I love that element of that I call that sort of confused perfect, imperfect, non-perfect information. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's no randomness in the game, but there is asymmetric information.
Yeah.
And I find that it's done in quite a few board games about movement and capturing, where you've got pieces and it's like, I'm actually playing one on Board Game Arena, can't quite remember the name of it, where you've got, I'll actually maybe double check, but Andy, I would like to take a step aside and ask you, what is something you consider to be brilliant? What is a brilliant thing? Brilliant thing. It's a little thing which is brilliant. You can say anything. It's something hopefully everyone has in their life and is underappreciated. Brilliant things.
Okay. This is, you put me on the spot. I love it. I'm going to say concrete. You may not know you have it in your life, but it's everywhere, and it is a brilliant thing. It's an amazing material. This is me putting my architect hat on now, which I don't get. It's quite dusty. I don't get it out very often. It's a brilliant material that allows for plastic 3-dimensional shape forming that we can inhabit, we can get inside, which is what buildings do. You and I play regularly at the National Theatre, and it is the most wonderful plastic concrete building, which I think you might agree has the most incredible acoustics in that foyer. And that's all down to the molded concrete waffle slab ceiling. And I think concrete.
Is that ceiling pure concrete? I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's formed basically. The concrete is a liquid that's poured into a mold like jelly, and then it sets, and they take the mold away, and then there's your concrete.
So that whole floor had to be one piece basically, and then lifted by cranes or something.
No, they will have built a formwork out of timber, and they will have used structural metal supports to hold the timber together, and they build a watertight mold. They pump the concrete in a liquid state. It sets, and then they take the timber away, and then you've got it. And then they would build that in stages. So they might do it in 2 meter stages. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, questionably quick questions is the next section. It's not an interrogation. It's just a questionably quick questions section. Questionably quick questions. And it turns out the game I was thinking of is called Volto. Here's an image of it. It kind of looks vaguely like Stratego. You've got your own bits on the back, but they all move slightly differently. So you've got the one which can capture in any orthogonal direction, but that's also the king, and essentially if that gets captured, then you lose the game. You've got the kind of ladies, it's a bit sexist. It's kind of saying, hey, there's more ladies, you can get your ladies captured and it doesn't matter, which is kind of problematic. But let's ignore that for the moment.
Yeah.
You've got the things that can move in any direction but can't capture, and then you've got the ones that can just move in one of the directions. So it's like, oh, is this the king or is it not? And then you've got the one that can just shoom, go all the way to the other side of the board and take exactly one thing. So my question to you is, have you played Stratego?
I love Stratego, and I played it a lot as a kid, and I haven't played it since I was a teenager, and I absolutely loved it because there was the fear and the surprise and the uncertainty always made for an exciting game. And I thought as a kid, I'd come up with this foolproof strategy where I would put bombs around something that was worthless. So I put my bombs around a miner or whatever it was. I can't remember now. And then I would watch everyone find the bombs and think, oh, my general must be behind the bombs, and it wasn't. And I thought I was the cleverest kid in the world for coming up with that strategy. And of course, I wasn't. So I absolutely love Stratego.
I mean, you outwitted a lot of your friends, it sounds like.
Yeah, but they didn't want to win as much as I did. But I've worked that through in my life. That's fine. I've dealt with that. That game looks fantastic. Yeah, that looks really exciting.
I mean, when we talk about that, it makes me think slightly of deck construction games. As you know, as you might not know, I am currently working on a deck construction game. Here's one of the cards off to the side of the screen. It's got spells on one side and little modules on the one side, and you're assembling your creatures and stuff.
Yeah.
How do you feel about deck construction games? Is that a game you could see yourself playing?
I would love to playtest your game. Absolutely. And one of the frustrating things about our playtesting sessions is that you can't playtest everything. But that's that's maybe not very interesting for anyone else. Deck construction, I'm aware of deck building.
So deck building is during the game, whereas deck construction is very much, okay, I make my deck and then I pit it against you. And then I could go home and maybe tweak a few cards if I want, like decide, okay, I'm going to change these cards. And then whether we see each other in half an hour, maybe we have 5 minutes to tweak our things, or maybe I see you the next day or in a week's time or even in a year's time. I'll have made whatever changes I want to make. You'll have made whatever changes you want to make. And then during the game, our decks are basically as they are. And then it's about, okay, pre-game deck construction, and then during the game, how can you use those decks, basically.
Yeah. My gut feeling is that I played a lot of Dominion, and I like the reactive way you can tweak your deck to respond to the game state. I love the fact that that happens within the game. I don't know if I want to go home and spend time thinking about my deck and rebuilding it and restructuring it and then coming back and testing it. But I want to try it and see how I feel about that. Because I think if I find that my constructed deck isn't working as well as I want to in the game, is there anything I can do about that whilst we're playing, or is that a case of, okay, next time I'll do better?
I mean, it depends. Like, there's going to be different ways that you can use the cards, and obviously with these cards, there's always at least 2 ways that you can use it. And it's like, okay, maybe I can use this spell now, or maybe I can use it later, or maybe I can attach this module to a different thing or take control of a different creature. But like, there is sometimes people in other deck construction games call it building the deck versus piloting the deck. And
Okay.
those are almost like two different
Yeah.
skills and two different
Yeah.
parts to it.
Well, I'm obviously not very familiar with this mechanism, so next time we meet, I'd love to play it and see how I react to it, and then
It
you can.
sounds like you're really wanting to try all the things in the world.
Oh,
Is that kind of true?
yeah, yeah, within reason.
I mean, where I don't want you to get super dark, and so we're assuming that everything is done with other adults in with consent, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And are there where's your personal kind of risk and time? No, I won't bother with it anymore.
Oh,
Factor.
so, um, risk. Oh my goodness me. Where do we start with risk taking? And what has gone wrong, in my opinion, with the level of caution that I see in the day-to-day world. I mean, I'm 45, and I see a big difference in how people live now than they did 15, 20 years ago. And I love taking risks. I mean, I'm not an idiot. Well, maybe I am an idiot, but I think the ability to feel like you can take risks is so important. And the ability to feel like you are safe enough to take risks, and it's okay to deal with the consequences of failure. I'm actually quite passionate about this idea that we need to be able to fail, and for it to be absolutely not only fine but important and vital that we do that. And I don't know where there seems to be a slight, this is a generalization, but I see a fear of failure being something that holds people back. And this has got a bit serious.
No, no, I like it, and I mean, when if we take a step back towards games, I mean, the head designer of one of the best-selling deck construction games out there is talking about banned cards. So sometimes there's a
Yeah.
card that's just too powerful, and they say, well, we want people to be able to play with their cards, but sometimes we just make a mistake. And then we realize, hey, wait a minute, this card, when it's being combined with all the many thousands of other cards in the game, in the entire history of this game, is a bit problematic.
Yeah.
So what could we do? We could play it safe, and we could absolutely, we have the skills to make it so that we never ban a card ever again. But if we were doing it, it just wouldn't be as exciting a game. We
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that we're pushing towards the line, and the question could come up, what's the ideal number of banned cards? And maybe it's like one every year or one every other year. But if you have zero, then that suggests that maybe you're not pushing into new territory, because if 10, even 100 people in an office somewhere are going to be able to work out how this works, how this happens, then it's not actually that interesting in real life. And it does remind me of making stuff. I mean, when I first made a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after to make noises, for me that was a risk. And I was like, okay, will people even get on board with this?
Mm.
And it became my best Kickstarter by
Yeah.
basically every metric. And then I did a game about drawing creatures, complementing the drawings and complementing the complements. And I'm like, will people engage with this? And I've had a couple of actually just the one out of 10 review on Board Game Geek, but that's by someone saying that it just totally didn't fit for them. And that kind of strong emotional reaction, frankly, is something that I'm kind of proud of.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then straight after, there's all these people saying this is the most valuable game ever, and that they feel like it's actually doing them good and bringing good into the world, because it makes them appreciate all the wonderful things out there that they could now start complimenting, because complimenting is a skill.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm really proud I took that risk to make it, and now more and more people are getting to enjoy it.
Well, that's what I mean. If you were someone who had been conditioned to say that taking a risk is going to cause you harm, you're less likely to take that risk, and you're going to be okay. You avoid any potential negativity, but you also remove the chance of having that feeling that you've created something that brings joy, which I think is maybe why we do this. So I think it's really important that we're encouraged to take risks.
I getting slightly dark again. It makes me think of, okay, I'm going to call the US as leaning towards fascism in some senses, because with banned books, I'm not sure if you're aware of all the book bannings that are going on in US libraries. And the way that they've worded what is unsuitable is vague enough that people are scared of their jobs and scared of being, imprisoned or heavily fined. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to remove all of these things from my library until I'm being told which ones of them I'm allowed to have back on. And it's that kind of, hey, if you make a mistake, something massively terrible will happen to you, whether that's a fine or incarceration. That then leads to people not being able to experiment and try all the wonderful things that life has, and that's very sad.
I absolutely agree. I think that I don't know if you're making a parallel between banning a magic card that makes the game less fun and governments banning books. I don't know if
I wasn't actually.
Okay, fine, that's good. I think going big and going a bit dark and but also turning the light on. I think if we're talking about issues that are relating to censorship and book banning, we've got to remember that history is long and big, and we are small and short. So whatever is happening now won't be like this in the future. We don't know what the future is like, but it's our job, and that's everybody, to take part in making the future what it will be. And we don't have any choice about that. That will happen. We can be as involved or as uninvolved as we like, but it's going to happen, and things change. So I am really positive and confident about the future, because I know from firsthand that things have been a lot worse in the past, and that is not talked about. And I don't want to go into it here because it's personal, but I know that when I was younger, the world was much worse than it is now, 100%.
Well, I mean, when you say 100%, like there's always going to be tiny things that you can say, okay, actually.
I should not have given
as a broad scale, I would agree that yes, the world is getting better. And part of it is that there is sometimes some fear mongering going on, but at the same time, when I talk about fear mongering, that's not to say let's ignore the bad stuff going on. That's to say, hey, let's rail against it, and hopefully we can fight against it to avoid slipping back. But generally, in terms of quality of life for people, in terms of access to medical care, it feels like things are, generally on an upward trend in terms of like, people, sure, there's transphobia around, but there's also less of that compared to, decades ago, where it just wouldn't have been, it would have been unthinkable for someone to be trans, essentially.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you there. So, as I said, we've got to look. All we can do is look at. We can only experience history in the here and now. But we've got to be able to remember that there's a bigger picture, and it's a long, long, long journey that we are a tiny slice of, and that is quite humbling in a way. But it doesn't diminish our own experience, and it doesn't diminish what's happening and what we're experiencing. So.
I have been talking to you just over an hour. Like, this time has really flown by.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd love to have you just over, like, the two of us just like sit together and chat for a day.
We can go all day.
Not like on stream necessarily, just like
no, don't subject everyone to
that. I do want to check in. How much time do you have, and when do you have to skedaddle?
I've got no plans, so I can chat a little bit longer, but I'm aware we don't want this to go on forever. So
I'll try and wrap it up within half an hour, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Um,
fine.
so the next questionably quick question that I want to ask is your first memory that you are willing to share.
Oh, well, okay. My first memory that I'm willing to share, that's that I have a memory of being given frozen fish fingers to suck as a baby when I was teething. And my mum denies this, and I think it might have been my gran who gave me frozen fish fingers to suck to numb the pain of me teething. I don't even know how old I would have been. I don't know how old kids are when their teeth start coming through, but it must have been pretty young, because I can remember the taste of the breadcrumbs on a fish finger and the cold feeling. Or I just got hold of some frozen fish fingers and decided to try and eat them. That's kind of more plausible, actually. So I can remember sitting they had one of these bouncy chairs, and it was put on top of the kitchen counter, which again is quite dangerous. But then this was the early 80s or the late 70s, and sitting in this bouncy chair sucking on frozen fish fingers. So you asked the question.
No, I love it. I love it. So let's talk about design, because you've made a lot of games, and I want to ask for you, is it just that original idea? What draws you to an idea? Yeah.
Well, the game you're showing there at the moment, it started off as being called Rush In Dolls, and it's now called Cups. And that came about, something will pop into my head, and it was that feeling of when you play cups and balls and you try and work out where the ball is under the cup, and 9 times out of 10 you get it wrong, and you're sure you're right. So often a game will come from a moment like that I want to gamify and it kind of find that emotion and put it into a game, so that, oh, I'm sure the ball is under that cup. It's got to be. It's that cup, and you lift it up, and it's not, and you go, how can this be? So often it's that kind of emotion, experiential emotion, that I want to embody, and then I work out, okay, how can I how can a game emerge from this, or how can a game enable this emotion to happen? So that's where I often start.
And thank you, Alex. That's a lovely thing for you to say.
Oh, thank you. That game is called Volcano No, which I wanted. One of my favorite games as a kid, and I still think it's an excellent game, is Escape from Atlantis. And we touched a bit on victory points earlier. What I love about Escape from Atlantis is not only is the theme and the mechanism so well integrated, but the game tells you who's winning by looking at the state of the board. Whoever's got more people on the island, they're winning. It's so straightforward, and it's so rich and so simple. So I remember in the 80s there was Escape from Atlantis and Lost Valley of the Dinosaurs, which 2 games were published in the UK by Waddington's, and they were just so wonderfully thematic. So I wanted to do a game about a cult of people who worship this volcano, and the people are called the Piner people because they also love pineapples, and they give offerings of pineapples to the volcano to keep it happy. So you play as the Piner people, and they've all got names beginning with P, like Percy, Paul, and they run around the volcano looking for pineapples to throw into the volcano. But eventually, the volcano, if you can't find enough pineapples, and if you can't sacrifice enough pineapples, the volcano gets more and more angry and spews out lava. And there comes a point in the game where you have to choose whether you're going to try and placate the volcano or just escape from the volcano, and that's kind of a pivotal point in the game. So that's the placate. So the players are all playing as different Piner people, and you have to vote, and you have to decide whether the majority is escaping or placating, and then you split into 2 teams. So
how many pineapples does a volcano need to be satiated, Alex asks?
Oh, a lot. Yeah, the volcano wants it. The volcano wants their pineapples. but then I also put in melons in, and you can, if you decide to be a bit there's the golden pineapple. There's also melons, and the volcano does not like melons, obviously, because volcanoes don't like melons, but the volcano needs their pineapples. So,
and Alex says, I reckon you'd need at least 10,000.
that's a lot of cards. That game.
I mean, it depends how many pineapples are represented on one card. Maybe every card represents 1,000 pineapples. I don't know.
There we go. We've streamlined it already. Now it's financially viable. So I hope I'm conveying that I like humor in games, and I like silliness, and I think it's a really, when it works, it's a really good way of engaging and connecting with people. If you can get someone laughing, that's a really good thing to feel on both sides. So it's a really good way of getting into a game and allowing people to get into a game. So that's Paolo. He's one of the pineapple. And there's a pineapple portal, obviously, which is like a warp card.
Anyway. Where is it? A game of... Well, I don't have the Turnip edition, but the game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different is all that this used to be. And I think it was an okay game. I mean, I hope...
Yeah.
And it was a game that I would have been proud to make. But then, Andy was part of that playtest, and Andy was asking, it just needs something more. I don't know what, but maybe a turnip, and I don't know what the turnip would do, but maybe everyone stands up or something, and I don't know what it would do, but everyone's smiling right now, so that makes me think it's a really good idea. And that's what Andy basically said. Not verbatim, but that was close enough your words.
Yeah, pretty much, as far as I remember.
Then I was like, okay, what would a non-creature thing do? Well, clearly, if the point of the game is you can't have two cards next to each other that are matching, maybe that's enough. But then what's to stop someone just going cards, turnip creature? Well, you need to have a limit on it. So let's chuck in a bunch of blank cards. I just had some blank cards with me and said, imagine that there's gloriously drawn turnips, the best turnips ever. And I mean, I am actually quite proud of how they came out in the end. But then we just played it, and it just works. And that really elevated the game. And it feels possibly a bit weird that I credited you that way on Board Game Geek.
No, I was so flattered. I thought that was a really wonderful thing to do. I was really flattered.
It's kind of like because to me there's like almost two, let's say arbitrarily, there's three parts of the game. One is that the things can't be at all matching, so your creatures have three different parts and they can't be matching. Then the second part is, okay, everyone's building up their own stack, and that allows everyone to feel like, hey, even if I end up with only having 10 cards, and at the end of the game you've got 30 cards, well, I've been furiously trying to grab stuff throughout, and hopefully I've still had a good time. And when we were talking about hope and being eliminated earlier on. But then the third part, which I love, which actually adds the teeniest amount of strategy, is when do you start turniping? Because you don't want to just start turniping or beetrooting or radishing like as soon as you flip over a card, because that just feels like a waste of one of your 5 a day. And so you might be thinking, okay, I'm going to try and find other cards, but then at some point you kind of have this mad rush where you just grab a bunch and this gives the game, I think there's very few games with like just one tiny decision point. It's basically a game that's all about execution. How quickly can you observe this stuff and grab this stuff, but then with this one teeny decision point. And that's something that, would not exist in any case. And I think you really taught me so much there with just embracing this thing, embracing the whimsy and just saying, hey, this is a funny thing. I am amused. Hopefully other people will be amused, and let's go with that. And I feel like along the way, it's so easy to lose that as a designer. It's so easy to get formulaic and feel like, okay, that's what works last time. Now I'm going to try and work this thing out, and you can try to bring it in, but you've got to follow your own. Hey, let's just throw some random stuff at the wall. And it's not about what sticks. It's about which bits of pasta makes me laugh.
Yeah, and what I love what you're saying, because ever since that playtest, however many, whenever it was, quite a few years ago now, I always ask myself, I say every game needs a turnip. And when I'm designing a game, I ask myself, what's the turnip in this game? What is it? And if it's not there, I need to put a turnip in. Obviously, turnip is a very, it could be anything. It could be anything. But
something that makes you feel giggle and something that seems to not quite fit.
It's something that is, it's like the grit in the oyster, which makes the pearl. It's the thing that makes you sit up and pay attention, and then makes you say, okay, I can't just carry on doing this without much involvement. I've got to pay attention. And it's when you're confronted with a sea of similarity, it's the difference that stands out, and that's the thing that you go, oh, what's that? I wanted to find out what that is. And it stimulates, and I think it's about stimulation. That's a lot of it. So
yeah, that's a really nice way to think about it, because so much of this can be designed out, and just saying, you know what, I'm going to do this, so gosh darn it, I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah.
And Alex, the whole thing about this pineapple thing and the pineapple, and it just sparks the joy. And Alex asks, do you have a pineapple? Also known as a pine cone.
Not yet. That might be too much. I don't know if I can deal with that.
And that sounds like an idea for a different game, but yeah. I do like it. Currently, the way it works is if you combine sets, all the vegetables are interchangeable, which I understand is maybe a little bit sad, but basically the Radish edition is the hard mode, and yeah, it's down to which graphics you prefer, really.
Yeah.
I just find it fascinating to think about following this. It feels like there's value in following this stupid idea. I know this sounds weird to phrase it that way, but the stupid ideas are the things that make people giggle and make people think, oh, that's kind of ridiculous. And if you don't know why it doesn't work, just getting it out there and seeing people play it and being like, what does this actually feel like?
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
I think I want to encourage everyone to be as stupid and irreverent and playful. And I think playful is the word, being playful and creative with ideas. And oh yeah, this is the Gruesome Garlicas game. So yeah, it's a shame you can't hear it, but it makes a lot of noise. It's a feeling of freedom, actually, that you can do anything, which is liberating but can also be overwhelming. So using humor and the uncertain and the surprise can be a way of reducing options, I think, as well. Because if it's not funny, then ditch it. If it doesn't make people pay attention, ditch it. If it isn't eye-catching, then ditch it. So yeah. So I'm just watching these.
Although not one I'd pick up from a convention library, says Alex. Yeah, it's not very good.
Well, I've play tested this with a lot of people, and more we have the hygiene aspects to deal with in this. So what I'm thinking is that if it is an issue, and I'm in a position where I want to start pitching this game to publishers, is that maybe the game would come with a dishwasher safe mouthpiece that you would put the party blower into, so that you could wash the mouthpiece and it could have Dracula fangs on it, I don't know, and then it would make it more palatable for a broader audience. And to use a word I hate, safer, I don't want to use that word. So these are the things I'm working out and thinking about at the moment. Lots going on.
Like, you've got so many projects, and which I love, and I wish that you were able to come to Fridays more often. I think the last game of yours that I played, and you've slightly rethemed it.
I've given it a theme. Yeah, our last playtest was really useful because it talked about how a game needs to be engaging and how the theme. and I've really tried to think about how the theme can help people play the game more easily. And I'm quite keen to test this again with you again to see if I've managed to improve it or whether I've just gone off in a completely the wrong direction. Which and
It's
then
always possible.
yeah, so it's often happens. So this game is a deduction game where you have partial information, and it was completely abstract, and it was my concern with the theme, which I've given it, is about witches trying to be entering the Witch of the Year competition, and you want to be the Witch of the Year, and you do this by brewing potions, but you're slightly telepathic, and you can't see all of the ingredients that are needed for the potion. So you've got to work together, but you've got to try and which witch is which? I don't know. Watch this space. Watch out for the witch. Yeah. So this is work in progress. My concern is that the theme is kind of
No, you know which witch is which. It's just which witch are you? Which witch are you?
I'll come back to you on that one.
So it sounds like you've got alternative win conditions, because previously it was about trying to get everything to, agree to the parameters that have been set by the sequence objectives, and you only know some of them. But now you can either win that competition or you can be the worst witch.
I play tested this option and it didn't go down well, because if you're the worst witch, you win by mixing the most potions but getting them wrong. So but you can and you win if you have mixed the most potions, so you're highest on the number of potions you've mixed, but you have the least points. But you have to be within a certain distance of the leader, so you can't just be deliberately incompetent and win. I play tested it with one group, and a few of them said they didn't like it because they felt that doing well should be rewarded, and the person who does the best should be the winner.
It has to make thematic sense somewhere. I mean, it's like, okay, if you are going to eliminate someone like QE or high society, where it's like, okay, eliminate the person who spent the most money. That kind of makes sense. Okay, I want to get the most stuff, but not spend the most money. And that's an interesting little wrinkle. That's the grit in the oyster, which is a phrase I'll start using. But if it's, you could do that, you want to make sure that, ideally, for me, the theme is kind of part of a way of piggybacking what's going on and making sense of the mechanics. Like photosynthesis, if it was about something else, I think it would work equally well as a game. But I'm not going to lie, like, I'm not going to deny the fact that Sabrina Miramon's art, also makes me smile a little bit, and the fact that it's okay, these are trees, therefore being in light is a good thing. And trees do physically block other trees. That makes perfect sense.
But they grow. It absolutely ouch. That's gonna hurt. So
and Alex does also say, going back to Gruesome Garlic, her Speak Out was a huge hit. That's true. So it's definitely not an insurmountable obstacle.
That's one I did look at. But going back, I always want a theme to make the game easier to play and to facilitate the understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it. If it's not doing that, then the theme is not working. And if it makes sense mechanically, if the mechanics of the theme, like Escape from Atlantis, if the mechanics of the theme contribute to the experience of the game, even better. It's essential. Well, we aim for it to be essential. That dissolving island is just fantastic. And it's all tied in, what's under the tiles and the changing board states and the people thrown into the sea. It's hilarious, and it's mean. So we go. I don't want to get into a conversation about. We need to bring back fun meanness in games, and that's okay. It's absolutely fine, everybody. We can do it.
I think there are games that have fun, spiteful, mean bits in them.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Can you give me an example?
I was thinking of No Thanks, where, hey, I actually kind of want this, but I'm going to put a penny on it just to not take it, because I know that you'll all have to put a penny on it to avoid not taking it. I'm thinking of my own Kitty Cataclysm. Those are the first ones that come to my mind. Hold on, I'm tooting my own horn.
No.
I'm thinking now, actually, you know what? Every war game, all of those things, even though like they are maybe a bit more complex than what you're talking about, like that's all like about smashing each other's face in Root. I mean, there's a game where you can build up stuff, and then I'm going to take down your things. I'm going to march in with my birds and crush your cats.
I love
Or
Root.
alternatively, you don't attack me when I'm the birds, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, now I've run out of pieces, and now my whole thing goes into turmoil, and then I go back to the start. I'm like, and that's.
But I love Root, and I call Root the most wonderful friend destroyer in the world. It's like it's fantastic, but that's a whole nother conversation. When I got into this about 5-6 years ago, I hadn't played any games at all, and I thought Take That was a boy band who did really good pop songs. I didn't realize it was this phrase that people used. I don't like this game because it's got Take That in it, and that's what I loved as a kid. I grew up with two brothers, and we were always fighting, we were always competing, and we were beating the hell out of each other. And at the time it felt awful, but you were alive. Looking back, it's just a fantastic experience to have that sort of, it's like when you see lion cubs fighting with each other. It's part of life, and it's part of learning how to experience life.
It's kind of by simulating a dangerous situation, we're kind of saying, hey, but that's not real. We are actually comfortable with each other. I mean, I think it's Jane McGonigal in one of her books talks about how teasing is a key thing about about kind of saying, hey, I could hurt you, but I'm not going to. And that builds up trust.
It's trust. It's absolutely, I was going to say it's trust, isn't it? It's about building trust, and it's actually showing someone that you really care about them, and you want to get to know them, and you want to have a relationship with them. They have a song called Patience. Yeah.
Alex says, Take That have a song called Patience. In game terms, putting Take That into a game of Patience doesn't make sense, but it could be a starting point for something.
That's the turnip, isn't it? That's the turnip. So we're going to do a Take That. We're going to get a Take That endorsed game called Patience, which is mean. Yeah. and it's for multiple players. And anyway.
Let me start winding down, and I would like to ask you a few more quick questions, if I may.
Of course.
So firstly, what's something that gets you up in the morning? What's something that really is? It would literally be multiplayer solitaire, says Alex. But what is something that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Pastries.
What's your favorite pastry? Like, tell me more.
So it's got to be warm, fresh from the oven. It's got to have that. I want the outside to be crispy and crunchy. Then I want a gooey, warm center. That's pretty much it. That's it.
How do you feel about pastries that you buy cold, but then you put into the oven for like maybe 5 minutes or so just to heat them up?
That's fine, but I've discovered you can buy bags of frozen pastries in the supermarket, and you keep them in the freezer, and you cook them from frozen, and they are excellent. And it's cheaper than going out to buy them from the shops. So I'm happy. So
I have not encountered these things.
You can get a bag of 6 pain au chocolat for a couple of quid, and then keep them in the freezer. So that keeps me sane.
In your bio, you talked about, well, I mentioned technology. I want to ask, why do you not use WhatsApp? And I'm not saying you should use WhatsApp, but I think it's really good that you've kind of made this conscious decision that this is not for me. This is not something that brings me joy. Similarly with Twitter, I want to come back to that. Why did you decide to cut these things out of your life? What goes into that decision?
Partly it's I can't use WhatsApp because I don't have a smartphone, and that's not true.
You could afford a smartphone if you wanted.
I could get a smartphone. I choose not to have a smartphone, and that's a deliberate choice because I don't want to be connected to the internet. I want to be connected to the internet as little as possible, and I want to be the person who decides when and why that is and for what purpose. And I want to spend as little time staring at a screen as possible. I have a complicated relationship with technology. I get very upset when I go to a supermarket and I can't use checkout with a person. I usually walk out of the supermarket, or I complain and then I walk out, because I think it's really important to have that human engagement. And I don't like the way things are going, but I'm hoping somehow it'll be okay. What was your question? Why don't
you use these things, and what went into your decision to step away from Twitter?
It wasn't an ethical decision. It wasn't anything to do with politics or what was going on at the time. I just felt like it wasn't giving me anything and it was a waste of time. I felt like it was a distraction. I felt like it gives a lot of these things give the illusion of human connection, and in fact they're a substitute for it. I'm not saying that's all it is. It's more complicated than that. I use a phone for making phone calls and talking to people. I love talking, you may have noticed, and I think you suffer with the same problem, which is a compliment.
I don't know if that's a problem.
No, it's a compliment. It's a compliment. I love problems. And so they're not a substitute for human relationships. And I'm not saying that they are, but they can be. And I think.
And your fear is that if you spend too much time on that, then it's going to take away from the time that you have to interact with other people, voice to voice, or at least here we can see each other's face, or even better in real life, where I could say, hey Andy, let's get out this game, and I was going to say let's slap each other, but that feels a bit mean. Like, that doesn't sound fun. I'd rather not, to be honest.
It depends what the context is. But it's another reason why I design tabletop games and not video games. I don't have the technological. Take that, yeah, boom. So it's another reason. We touched on this actually when I mentioned about you doing hand-drawn illustrations. As an architect, I started off doing all my drawings by hand, and it was a wonderful way of connecting the human scale and the human experience to a visual product. I ended up doing the majority of my architectural work on computers, and I found that the younger people I was working with who hadn't been educated by doing hand drawings didn't understand about scale and didn't understand about how humans sit within their designs. So they would design houses with massive windows or tiny windows and not understand the relationship between the human body and what they were designing. And the reason
bigger windows are basically always bigger or better.
They've got to be, as long as they're okay. Let's talk about that another time. It's probably a bad example, but they were demonstrating a lack of understanding.
I understand that there's probably structural reasons why the window can't be, the entire wall. But I'm really lucky. I feel really happy when I look over there, and there's basically from about just below my waist up to the top of the ceiling. It's basically a window. If it was one of those places with one of the tiny window, no, that's no good. But the bigger the window, the more light that comes in, the happier I am as a human.
I used the bad example. I used a bad example.
And Alex says, not if your house falls down.
I used the bad example, but part of technology is a tool. It isn't a substitute. So it can be an amazing tool to facilitate your ability to do something, but that ability comes from you as a physical human being. It is not a substitute, and I'm very passionate about that. And I think it can be confused for being something that is instead of, rather than as well as, or a facilitator.
And Alex says it's a bit like someone preferring to play board games on a table rather than online.
Exactly.
Right, Bez? And I genuinely don't know which way this argument is going, whether you're saying, hey, Bez, you've been playing lots of Board Game Arena, or whether you're saying, hey, Bez, you don't play tests digitally. because I do embrace both. And the truth is, for me, Board Game Arena, I love. I mean, I sent Alex a link to something to a new game that I'd played because, and I won't say why, but I'll be curious to hear what Alex thinks of that game. And in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh, this is a nice thing. I don't know if I want to play it over and over and over online, but it is. I get introduced to that, and that inspires me. That makes me aware
Yeah.
of what else is out there. That
Yeah.
just makes like, oh, this is exciting. And just playing through all of these things, even though I have done it a lot out of a sense of completionism, I'm not going to lie. And I am slightly worried at this point that it is getting to be an unhealthy habit, and I would like to slow that down.
Yeah.
But I do also feel like, in terms of either learning games or if you're interacting with the mechanics, because the mechanics and the process of games is also something interesting to me.
Yeah.
But when I go online, it is more of a, okay, sometimes it's with people I know and just one works really well online because I make like a move every day or something, and then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you made that reference for, you said Forge when it was Key, and I said Market, and we had two games going on, and that isn't that funny, and we can enjoy that shared familiarity. But when I'm playing something like photosynthesis online, it is very much a, I'm fascinated by this as a system. And I am a system driven person, but then the question of, if I'm getting together, would I rather be like, more and more, I'm coming around to your style of thinking that even though I do love perfect information games, it does often make one person a little bit sad if it's just like two people. Because if you win Hive against me, I'm thinking, okay, how many times do I have to play it before the game gets interesting? Whereas if you win Uptown, just to cite a game that's just off to my right, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe next time I'll draw different tiles, and maybe different stuff will happen.
It gives you hope, doesn't it? It gives you hope.
Yeah, there's not really a turnip in photosynthesis.
Second edition. Underground. Yeah, I don't know what it would be. The lumberjack. The lumberjack in there.
I really wanted to, work on something vaguely similar but totally different with Almerhach. But they got back to me and said, thank you very much. I'm glad that you like my game. But I'm too busy this year to work on new projects, which is fair enough,
Yeah, that happens. Making connections for the future, maybe. So that's what it's about.
But I do love photosynthesis. It is, I'm not dissing Almerhach's game. Just like if I were to feel it was okay, like I'm still tempted to just work on something until it's different enough that I feel comfortable, because I would strip out all the numbers on the board, and I would I don't know, make it like area control with the seeds, and be like, okay, everyone's throwing seeds in, and it's like the person who's buried the most seeds onto this animal that's wandering around, or throwing the most seeds into this spot that then gets a new tree there.
It's psychotic squirrels stockpiling for winter, isn't it? It's going to, who's the fattest squirrel? I don't know, just an idea.
I just love that, like the rays of light, like that, and it anyway, let's move on from that. And you very quickly, you talk, why are games important? You are an advocate for the benefits that games and play have on our mental health. Why are games important? Why do they help us?
They foster connections with other people, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is what life is about. We are social creatures, and they enable us to socialize. They enable us to develop social relationships. Play enables us to challenge ourselves and question ourselves, and it enables us to remove ourselves from ourselves. I've said ourselves a lot now. And I think children understand play. Children learn through play. They explore through play. They test themselves through play. They test other people through play. And they go through an incredibly quick development process. We can still use that as adults. And I think play is not something that is trivial and silly and throwaway. It is something that is really important that we may or may not have devalued. So more play, understanding the value and the importance of play in the bigger picture with everything else. It's so important.
I absolutely agree. It's really important to be allowed to have a sense of escapism and to step out of the real world and in the back of your mind, you might be contemplating the real world because, we're not completely out of it, but then we come back and we've got a new perspective maybe, or we've got a little bit more joy singing in our hearts. And Alex wants to talk about squirrels and how oak trees have a symbiotic relationship with them, where some years squirrels drop many more times acorns than the population can deal with. And then the acorns, grow up.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. There's a whole series of games in that.
And my final question to you is, why do you hate victory point tracks? And do you hate victory points, or is it just the tracks that are off to the side?
Oh, they're similar but different. I don't hate them. I'm just being deliberately controversial to get people annoyed. I don't know. I think they're lazy. I think that they are lazy, and I have designed games with victory point tracks, so I am lazy. When I design a game, I'm very lazy. When I design a game with a victory point track, I want it to be as short as possible. I think it goes back to my desire to have games show you who's winning by looking at the game. But there's something, can I tell you a secret? There's something I hate more than victory point tracks. And that's those little pads of paper you get at the end of a game with things along the top, and then the players down the side. Then I've got 3 of those, 7 of those, 1 of those, 2 of those, none of those, -4 of those, 15 of those, and then you have to do a day's worth of little adding up and subtracting, and then you find out who wins. So you're playing this really fun game. So the joy graph is going like this, and then it's maths time, and everyone just doesn't give a rat's ass anymore. It's like, I hate that. It's just how to kill the fun. And I'm sorry, a lot of games do it, but I was like, no, thank you.
I mean, I totally get it. And sometimes it does feel like a necessary evil, but I do think that all else being equal, I agree with it.
Yeah.
And I've gone on record as saying that, actually, Phil was saying something similar last week about it's really unfortunate that conquest and conflict are 2 metaphors that games are really good at simulating. That's really problematic from a political point of view.
Yeah.
And I feel like the easiest theme to make a game around is magical spell wars. And because it's like, hey, it's magic, we can explain anything because it's magic and it's spells. And I've made prototypes of stuff about magical spell wars. I'm not saying I would never do something about magical spell wars, but it's totally the easiest theme.
Yeah, and the game I'm working on now is about witches making spells, but it's not about that. It's not about that.
It's not about wars. I mean, you're not. No. It's about studying and
conflict and combat and contest. I would rather use the word contests rather than combat. I think what they are presenting are
but even a contest, I think, is slightly more different, because if you say the word contest, quickly it could be like, okay, who's the best student in this school, or who's the dog show, who can groom their dog the best. Like, that's a more interesting theme and more different. I mean, of course, all competitive games are ultimately contests of some sort, so it makes sense to have a theme of some sort of contest, but it's the combat that is what people go to firstly, and it's the conquest and combat that's the most go-to thing.
Here's a depressing thought, which might explain why combat is so prevalent. It's because I agree with that, absolutely, but it's because what is the ultimate failure condition? Death. And that is such a strong indication of loss. and it is actually a painful, difficult thing to talk about in a meaningful way. But it's very easy to say, "You're dead. You've lost," and that's final. That's everyone understands that. So that's maybe why there are so many games about war and combat and fighting, because the win condition and the loss condition are understood by everybody. Yeah, that would be harsh. It would be,
if everyone who submits the dog to the dog show but doesn't have the best dog, death for you. You don't deserve to have a dog. Death.
But would the result of this mean that only the dog shows only have amazing dogs in them? In which case it would be the best show ever, because no one would enter a dog that might lose. It's too risky. So what it might do is elevate the quality of the dog show. That's maybe a good way to end, because it's controversial. I don't know.
I don't think it would. I think you'd end up with the only people who would enter would be people who didn't value their own life.
Sign me up.
Only ghosts enter and zombies, I guess.
Yeah, zombie
Andy, I've asked you a lot of questions. We've chatted for almost 2 hours at this point. But I would like you to ask me a question. Ask me and everyone else out there who might be watching. What is the question of the day? Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way.
Oh. Question of the day. I think it might be about tea. Why do people not use teapots anymore?
Yeah, that's true. I like teapots. True story. Back when I was, at my parents' house, and then I sometimes had people over, it would be a lovely thing to say, okay, I'll get some tea. And then you put like maybe 4 bags, and then it's a fairly large teapot, and then you just, hey, everyone's getting some tea. Oh, you're done with your tea. Here's some more tea. Or you're done with, and the pot's finished. Let me pop in some more tea bags and some more hot water. It's a lot more social. It feels like we're embracing the community a little bit more. Whereas nowadays it's like, okay, I've got my little cup, and I'm going to put like 1 tea bag in there, and then you've got your little cup, and you're going to put 1 tea bag in there, and nary shall the two meet, even if we're having the same exact tea, which is kind of sad.
I was going to say, it also, having a teapot means everyone has to have the same, so it's a shared experience. Now, I have friends over for board games. Everybody wants a different tea or a different drink, and it's like, I spend more time making varieties of tea than I do playing board games. So I'm going to bring back the teapot, and if you don't like it, then you can have some tap water.
Alex says tea has become much less of a social event than when it was introduced. The convenience of a tea bag is bound to grow in popularity over time.
Yeah,
but
different experiences.
I think you're right. There is something really magical about, okay, if you are pernickety about your tea and you need it at a certain strength for whatever, then maybe the teapot isn't for you. But I think the teapot encourages us to make what's the word I'm looking for? Compromises.
Yes.
Encourages us to think about other people.
Yep.
And I think that there is something lovely about that. You know what?
You can have tea cozies as well. You can have novelty tea cozies to put over the teapot to keep it warm. We've got one that looks like a sheep.
Keep on talking.
Okay. I've got tea cozy, but I can't find it. So you're putting the kettle on.
I do have a glass teapot, but it's not a very good one, because the big problem is, as you can see, the spout is like this high. So actually, you can only have the tea up to this point, if you see what I mean.
That is, I'm going to say that's style over substance, and it's not a very good design.
Yeah, I am disappointed in this teapot.
Yeah.
I mean, but
you've heard
it's better than nothing. But also, this teapot, when you consider that it can only go that high, it's basically enough for about 3 cups, which is not great. You want a teapot that can hold the heat, that can, when you pour it out, it's like one of those things that they've got at a good Chinese restaurant. They know what they're doing with their tea.
Yeah. On that note.
Alex says, quite a few people have gone back to loose leaf for environmental reasons, and all it really required was a smaller 1 to 2 person teapot. But so the question of the day, for if you are watching this after the fact, my question to you is, do you have a teapot? Do you use teapots? What do you think about teapots? And Alex says quite a few people I know, just to mend that. But that's the question. And now, as always, I'm going to ask over to you. What are you up to? You can share what's if you want to. I am kind of I'm going to make sure I get outside because yesterday I didn't get outside until it got dark, and that's not a great thing. So this morning, getting myself, just a quick jog around the block was good. I feel like I do have a lot of preparation to do for UK Games Expo. I'm going to I've got a lot of illustrations to finish, but I'm going to disregard all of that for at least a couple of hours and allow myself to wander around the park. Maybe go to the Rose Garden.
Great.
Yeah, I'll charge my phone, maybe listen to some music, and because I like listening to music or podcasts as I walk, and that allows me to kind of be like, okay, that's what I do. But
Great.
and Alex says, I have a teapot somewhere that I don't use very often. Hashtag I'm a teabagger.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
So, talking about teabagging, anyway, what are you up to today?
Today, a friend of mine, Alan, is coming over this afternoon, and we're not going to do some playtesting. He's also a board game designer who comes to the playtest group, Alan Wallet.
Oh, yes.
And we are probably not going to do some playtesting because we find that actually we don't spend enough time getting to know each other outside of games. So he's coming over to hang out, in his words, which is I'm really looking forward to that.
Nice.
And that's the rest of the day. So looking forward to that.
That sounds lovely. And to people that I know, I hope you both have a wonderful time.
Great. Thank you.
And I'm going to recap and wrap up before we finish up. We talked about a little bit about imposter syndrome and struggling to say you're a board game designer, even though you're a published board game designer. We talked about the situation in UK Games Expo and meeting up with Zev and Wizkids and falling in love with the game like halfway through. We talked about social media and how it can become all-consuming. We talked about Posca pens. We talked about something oh yeah, you do reps and weightlifting, and in between you've got about 90 seconds to think and mull over stuff. We talked about how some of your ideas have legs, and one of your idea you literally put legs into it. We talked about Rear Window, a game where you're playing the director versus Hitchcock, which feels like a weird kind of. I thought they were the same thing, but sure.
No, you're the director versus the players. The director is Hitchcock.
Oh, the director is Hitchcock. So
yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay,
makes more sense. Absolutely.
We talked about Heat and the idea of having a victory point track that is just the place of the thing, and it actually reminds me of Complexity, David Brain's game, which was all about where you are on the victory. Well, there's two tracks. One is how many points you have. One is how much resources you have. But then where you place on this town, your two little people determine how many points you get from it. So it's an interesting little thing.
Yeah.
We talked about contemplation being something that is maybe best left to unguided. Hey, everyone do it in its own way, at least for you, as opposed to the structured contemplation that you might get out of a perfect information game. We talked about randomness and backgammon and tactics feeling more dynamic and reactionary compared to strategy. We talked about Connect for Spin, and we talked about Downfall with that hidden information. We talked about Concrete being a brilliant thing, Stratego and deck construction games. We talked about people not taking enough risk in life and also in games, but generally in life, people should feel more free to be able to fail sometimes. We talked about censorship, which is horrible and problematic, and by doing it in a slightly loosey-goosey way, you can instill even more fear, which, within a safe environment like a game is fine, but then obviously within, a government instilling fear into its citizens is horribly problematic. And we talked about saying no to victory point tracks. We talked about having the grit in the oyster, thinking, what is the turnip in this game? Talking about the theme and the pastries in the morning, not wanting distractions generally, how digital can remove the soul and the understanding. fostering connections, a wonderful thing for board games, how play can challenge ourselves. And then we talked more about victory points and also that end game arithmetic, which can be a little bit anticlimactic, and then about the beauty of a teapot, but not this teapot. I mean, I don't know if I'm. Yeah, this was left behind by a previous housemate, and
Okay.
I was the one, and I was one more likely to use it than any of the existing housemates, so I took it when I moved out. But like I'm probably not remaining in long enough here to buy a teapot. Like I shouldn't, but maybe when I get settled in Thailand,
Yeah.
I will buy a teapot.
You can get some good tea in Thailand, so.
But yes, after all of that, I want to say to everyone, please, if you felt this was useful or interesting or entertaining, please spread the word. This is episode 991, so that means that episode 1000 will be in a week and 2 days, and after that, I will stop streaming for some period of time. I will not be doing daily streams anymore. Certainly not in the way that I've been doing it. I might be doing it like when I restart after UK Games Expo. It might be like a weekly thing, because I have enjoyed my chats with Alan Paul and Jess Medringham, and it would be a shame to never do that again. So it might be like a once a week, like I stream on a Wednesday. That feels like a reasonable schedule, and then I still get to sometimes sleep in, sometimes say, you know what, today I'm just going to head out at 10 a.m. and cycle up to Hampstead Heath. Maybe I should do that as my exercise today. I've not been up to Hampstead Heath in a while.
Go for it.
Tell me what you think. Do you think I should cycle or walk around? But in any case, thank you very much, everyone. And most importantly, thank you very much to Andy Beardsley.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bez. It's been fantastic. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
What do you think, cycling or walking?
Cycling. Yeah.
And if I cycle, I don't know if this is too much, but there is a very nice ice cream shop that, like, literally every week they've got new flavors.
It's never too much. It's never too much. That's my motto. Is where's the turnip and it's never too much. On that note.
If you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places. Stuffbybez.com/streams will tell you about my future streams. There's going to be a bunch of stuff because I'm at Herefordshire Mega May charity event this weekend. And Andy, where would you like to be found?
I'm on Instagram, as you can see on the screen there, Andrew_Beardsley_board games. And yeah, a bit about me on Board Game Geek as well. So that's it.
And yeah, I like it too. I exercise at the ice cream shop. And to all those people out there, lots of love. Thank you so much for your time and yeah, for making this a thing. And the only thing left to say at this point is lots of love and bye, 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 bye. This is goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. Now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.